With Arsenal's injuries and their slightly more pragmatic approach this season, are they better suited to winning the Champions League than the Premier League, Kweku?
It's a tough one, right? I think a team like Arsenal, who've been challenging for the last couple of seasons, they should be challenging on all fronts. They should be challenging for the Premier League, the Champions League, the League Cup, which it looks like they're going to go out of, the FA Cup, which they have gone out of. But I think it comes down to squad building again. I've said it before. The squad building wasn't good enough in the summer, and Arsenal find themselves short in a number of areas, which means that they might have to prioritise the competition. If you ask Arsenal fans what competition they'd rather win, they're split down the middle. Yeah. They haven't won the Premier League for 21 years. There's a lot of Arsenal fans who've never seen it, but they've never won the Champions League. And if you go through the pantheon of great clubs in world football, there's only probably PSG, if you call them a great club, Atletico Madrid and Arsenal that haven't won the Champions League or the European Cup or an iteration of that trophy. And so this is an opportunity for Arsenal. Like you said, that I think their squad is set up more for cup competitions, and this looks like the only cup competition they're going to be in long term. They'll qualify out of the group phase. I don't see them overturning the 2-0 deficit against Newcastle in the League Cup. So they'll have two things to concentrate on. It's an Arsenal team that are interesting though, right? In terms of composition, I look at their midfield and I ask myself, what are they trying to do? I think I watch Arsenal games a lot, and Declan Rice seems like, apart from Odegaard, obviously, but he seems like one of their most creative forces on the ball. And I don't know if that's what he was brought in to do when they brought him for 100 mil a couple of seasons ago. And so they baffle me. I think their strength lies in their centre-backs or their defence. You think about how lethal Gabriel is from set pieces. I know Saliba's not had his best season, but I think when called upon in big games, he can be relied on. But I do look at this Champions League as an opportunity for Arsenal. If you look at the top teams in Europe, Real Madrid struggling, got turned over not only in the league by Barcelona, but in the Super Cup. Look at Liverpool, who are probably the favourites of the competition, but Arsenal played Liverpool in the league this year and got a draw. They're not teams firing. Look at City, who are struggling. Yeah. If you look at European football, there's an opportunity for a team to go and maybe cause a surprise in the Champions League. And why not it be Arsenal? I don't necessarily think it's trophy or bust yet for Arteta. But when you talk about phases, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think we're supposed to be in phase 5 right now, and that should result in a trophy at the end of the season. The Champions League is a great opportunity for that.
Yeah, I think the phase talk is a little bit silly. I think Arteta's obviously improved Arsenal and probably will continue to do so. He has spent a lot of money though, and I think without a return on that investment being a trophy, I know they won the FA Cup, I do think at some point questions will start to be asked, particularly if Arne Slot can just slot in, no pun intended, by one player in Federico Chiesa and walk the Premier League. If that does happen, I think that will put a little bit of pressure on Arteta. But I do look at the side and I think, okay, Saka's injured, but he'll probably be back for the next round of the Champions League. I just don't think that squad is good enough or big enough to win both of these. And I think Arteta's not going to, and the players aren't going to, because they're the ultimate professionals who want to win every single game at all costs. We know that's what professional footballers are like. I think at some point in the season, and I said it last season, I think at some point in the season it probably will come a point where they might have to start prioritising, whether that's in team selection and resting a certain players for one competition over the other. And I think that Arsenal are better suited to winning the Champions League. We always say that teams with really good defences win cup competitions like the Champions League. And I think that's why people like Mourinho and Ancelotti have been so successful in those competitions. And as you mentioned, Arsenal's strength, particularly now without Saka, really, really does lie in the defence. So I think if they are to prioritise one, if I was Arteta and I was an Arsenal fan, I would want them to prioritise the Champions League, because I do think there's a bit of a dearth in talent in the whole of Europe this year.
When you speak about Arsenal, I feel, not you, but when the discourse continues about Arsenal, it seems like there's excuses to be made, like the squad's not good enough. But is there an argument to be made that Arteta should coach his way out of this? Imperfect teams have won major trophies before. Think about the City team that won the league without a striker. Yeah. Think about the Real Madrid team that won the Champions League last year without a striker. Think about teams that have won massive trophies. Liverpool this season. What was everyone crying out for Liverpool in the summer? They need a centre midfielder. Yeah. They didn't go and buy one, and Slot coached his way out of it. There's an argument to be made that if Kai Havertz can give you, 15 goals a season, which he's probably on course to do in all competitions, top managers can coach their way out of difficult situations. I saw Antonio Conte win the league with Chelsea with Victor Moses, no disrespect, and Marcos Alonso playing wing-back. Yeah. Teams aren't perfect. This Arsenal team's far from perfect. They've got holes in it. But this Liverpool team's got a hole in it, or apparently had a hole in it, until Slot figured out that Gravenberch can play in centre defensive midfield. I know that City's team that won the league without a striker was an incredible team, an incredible force, but without a number 9, it was almost unheard of. When I think about Chelsea in 2021 that won the Champions League, that front three, that was Kai Havertz, who is much derided right now, who leads the line for Arsenal, Timo Werner, who we all know what Timo Werner is, and Mason Mount, who can't stay fit. That team won the Champions League. And so I think Arteta's good enough coach to coach his way out of this and end the season with a major trophy. But there needs to be a change in belief. There needs to be a change of noise around Arsenal. I think fans need to get on board with the fact that you might not be able to go and build this perfect team in January, but you've got a good enough team that can go out there and compete. And like we both touched on, the teams in Europe, there's frailties with all of them. If Real Madrid, Man City, Liverpool, they're not perfect teams. There's no reason why Arsenal can't progress to the latter stage of the Champions League and potentially win the competition for the first time in their history.
And I guess my thinking around it, I completely agree with what you said. I think the thing is, even if Arsenal lose the next two, they probably will still qualify and they'll go straight into that round of 16. Then they have 8 games to win. Obviously, in the Premier League, it's a little bit different. They've still got 18 games to win in the Premier League. They have 8 games to win, and they can feasibly win just 4 of them, right? In fact, they could probably feasibly just win 3 of them by enough of a margin. So just by numbers alone, Arsenal have a better chance in terms of how many games they have to win than they do in the Premier League. And yeah, imperfect teams have won competitions, and there have been teams which are way more imperfect than this. But you said that Arsenal have a hole. I think they have more than a hole. I think they have a few issues. I don't think Lewis Skelly is obviously 18 years old. He's been playing fantastic so far. They don't have a natural left-back who is fit at the moment. Trossard and Martinelli has obviously caused a lot of debate. I don't think either of them are good enough, ideally. And then they really do not have a striker. They do not have a goal scorer. And club competitions, particularly the Champions League, you do usually need a killer. And if Saka's going to be injured for a little part of the season, I think that's where they could struggle.
Yeah, no, and I completely hear that argument, but I don't think Arsenal fans want to hear those excuses. Or some Arsenal fans are the ones making those excuses, but I don't want to hear those excuses because this is 3 years into a team that have been one of the best in Europe, right? The first season maybe caught people by surprise when they challenged City for the league, but the next season certainly wasn't a surprise, and they probably should have won it. And this season, everybody had them down as either favourites or second favourites to win it. And so if you were favourites at the beginning of the season or second favourites to win the league, then I don't want to hear come January that you've got holes in your side. Even though you have, they're clear and they're glaring, but you should figure out a way to churn out results and pick up big wins in big games.
Well, we mentioned phases at the beginning. Arteta's spent 800 million or so. He's had 5 years.
I don't like hearing the spending chat.
I think it's relevant. Okay. I think it's relevant because I think you can have certain managers, maybe even at the moment like Ange Postecoglou, who's crying out for a little bit more money to be spent and it's not being spent. And you can have certain managers who are hamstrung by their owners. Arteta has not been hamstrung. He's had £800 million to spend on his squad, and we're still talking about holes in it. But my point is, he's spent a lot of money. He's been there for 5 years. If a major trophy doesn't come, how long can it not come before players, fans, the ownership start to think, okay, maybe this isn't the guy who's going to lead us back to the promised land?
That's a great question, and I'll give credit to Harry Symeou who pointed this out. And he, again, and I talked about this in the previous video about how the perception of KSC, the ownership group, has changed at Arsenal. But what they have shown in their ownership, whether it's as a minority owner or as a majority owner as they are now, or complete owners, is that they want a team that can constantly qualify for the Champions League because that means guaranteed revenue. They've not yet shown that they want to build a team that can go out there and win championships, right? So I think this Arsenal team is currently constructed for the next 3 or 4 years. You can guarantee they'll finish in the top 4. But they haven't shown the next step to go and bring in that striker or that attacking player to take them to the level of a prime City or a prime Liverpool. And so that remains to be seen. I think the ownership group will be more than happy with Arteta if he's qualifying for the Champions League year in, year out.
Kai Havertz was expensive.
I know. But he wasn't... Was he the piece that Arsenal needed to take them over the top? I don't think anybody thought when they brought in Kai Havertz, oh, he's a player to win the league. Whose
fault is that? Because Arteta wanted him.
Arteta wanted him.
Could he not have spent 50-odd million on a better striker?
That's the failings of maybe the people behind the scenes. But I also think that now we're hearing noise that Arsenal might not have the funds to go in this January. But in the summer, we were told that they're in a great financial position when it comes to PSR. So I am looking at the ownership group. They do need to serve the fans. They need to serve the squad. They need to serve Arteta by bringing in top quality players. Maybe it's a little bit of Arteta being stubborn, but I want to see them go spend big to try and win these trophies because we saw it with Liverpool. We saw it it. We've seen it with City. We've seen it with top teams that if you want to go and win the biggest trophies, Real Madrid won the Champions League last year. And I know that Mbappe was on a free, but they went and brought in Kylian Mbappe. Those are the levels you want to win these trophies, and we need to see Arsenal reach those levels. So I'm watching KSC very, very closely because I have a funny feeling that they are more than content to finish in the top 4 year in, year out and not actually go and try and compete for the biggest trophies.
Well, they are in the Champions League. They're third in the Champions League table. They take on Zagreb. I mean, I'll ask for your prediction. I'm sure I can guess it's a variety of numbers to nil, but go on.
Yeah, we've not talked about Zagreb because there's no reason for us to talk about Zagreb. The narrative in this game is Arsenal. I think Arsenal win this game convincingly, and I'm going for a 4-0 win.
Yeah, I would have said 3 or 4 nil.